jettison the lunar module and use the bulk of my propellant, I can be home in roughly about a day and a half. I'll come around the front side of the moon. But something, some gut feeling, and that's all it is, says don't use it. That engine won't work. The other option, I'm going to have to go completely around the moon. It's going to take between 4 and 5 days to get home. But to the best of my knowledge, I only have enough electrical power in the lunar module for 2 people for 2 days. There's nothing more than this gut feeling. I make the decision to swing the mission around the moon. Call my controllers up and say, okay, all flight controllers, listen up. Be advised that all mission planning from now on will be around the moon. We will not, I repeat, we will not execute a direct abort. And this comes as a shock to many of the controllers because they believe this is the wrong decision. But they also know it is decision time, and they are the ones that must execute it. Plus 1 hour. My team has finally accomplished handover to Glenn Lunny's team, and he is immediately challenged because the third fuel cell is now failing in lifetime, and that cell is down to less than 15 minutes. So he scrambles the crew over the lunar module to complete the power-up, but most importantly, he has to transfer the navigation data from the command module computer, which is going to die, and put it over in the lunar module computer. We didn't have a data bus transfer capability in those days. All the computations are pencil and paper, and they must be perfect. So while Glenn's doing that, I'm walking downstairs to where the Tiger team is forming up. As I walk downstairs, I think literally we're going to have to do in minutes and hours what normally takes days and weeks. And we're going to be working outside all known design and test boundaries, and the spacecraft walk into the room. Crowded, noisy, smoky, a lot of confusion because many of the people just came in from the rest period, haven't had a chance to get briefed. Go to the blackboard, and for about 45 minutes, we list the problems we expect to see. Our water system may freeze, propellants may freeze, batteries may freeze, large number of survival issues. How do we navigate? How do we get back through the Earth's atmosphere? And when we finally finish this long list of must-dos, I give the team their mandate. We have never lost an American in space, and we sure as hell aren't going to lose one now. This crew is coming home. You got to believe it, your team must believe it, and we must make it happen. And from that moment forward, that team had their direction, and over the next 4 days, they pulled off a miracle, bringing the crew of Apollo 13 home. Meanwhile, in the control room upstairs, Lunny's team has had the crew perform a very small maneuver. If we hadn't done anything, the spacecraft would have gone around the moon, about 5 days later passed by Earth, missing it by roughly about 80,000 miles. But now with this maneuver, we're bringing the spacecraft back to Earth, and we've added some finality to the mission. It's going to be too late, but at least we're bringing the crew home. Now, the Soviet Union has been listening to our communications. They've been tracking us. They know we got a mission in trouble. They call us up, give us their ship locations, and offer their assistance rescuing the crew of Apollo 13. Literally, by now, the entire world is helping us bring this crew home. We now have our first press conference because the media believes the crew's lost, and at the conclusion of the press conference, they're given the opportunity to come over into mission control, set up business over there. We patch all the voice communications into the communications booth where the press is. So we're literally living in a fishbowl. Everything that we are saying and everything that we are doing is being reported live to the world as it is happening. Plus 10 hours, we have accomplished team handover one more time in mission control, and this was one of the real miracles of 13. These teams kept changing like clockwork so that each one of the teams would pick up their set of responsibilities, carry the problems forward to the next shift, work the problems as they came about. And Milt Windler's Maroon team now has the helm. And things have settled down to the point where you got plenty of time to talk to the crew. But most importantly, we're going through the events leading up to and after the explosion, trying to figure out what on board the damaged spacecraft will be useful in coming up with our return plan. 24 hours after the explosion, my team is back on console again. Get home fast maneuver is on board the spacecraft. Power management plan is in work. We figured out how to navigate. That was one of the difficulties that we had because with this debris cloud surrounding the spacecraft, we no longer could see our navigational stars, so we had to come up with new techniques to navigate using sun, earth, and moon. And we voiced this instructions up to the crew, so the crew's all set up for the maneuver, very tight limits upon all the propulsion parameters. Crew calls out engine start, and the engine's fishtailing. It's not steering properly. I say, "Hey, Prop, what the hell's going on?" He says, "Give it a few more seconds, Flight. Let's just watch it." And we watch that engine, settles down, starts thrusting correctly. 4.5 minutes later, crew calls shutdown. And then they start their post-burn report, and we immediately recognize our mistake. When they computed the engine trim for the start of the maneuver, we assumed 2 crewmen would be in the lunar module and 1 crewman would be in the command module. Well, that assumption was wrong, so from now on in mission control, there will be no more assumptions. Well, the maneuver cut a day off the return journey. It also changed our landing point. We're now going to land in the South Pacific, just east of Samoa. So we send the aircraft carrier Iwo Jima to the new landing location. Now the only management flap of Apollo 13 begins. Deke Slayton comes up to me at the console, leans over and says, "Look, I want you to get my crew to sleep. They're too damn tired. They're going to make a mistake." About the time I got his input, my boss, Chris Kraft, gets me, and he says, "Nope, you're using too much energy. You ought to get that spacecraft powered down." Well, the third guy was Max Faget. He's chief of engineering. Max says, "Nope, don't listen to those two. What you got to do is you got to restore thermal balance to the spacecraft." Well, that was the direction that we were already going, because we've been tracking temperatures for the previous 24 hours. On the sun side, it was like plus 150, dark side, minus 180. So we had a 330-degree temperature gradient across the spacecraft. Systems on the dark side were freezing up, but most importantly, they were concerned about the structure and integrity of the spacecraft. So now we have no source of energy except the sun. So what we must do is invent a barbecue-type maneuver. We call it a passive thermal control roll. But we've never done this using the lunar module thrusters because they're just not located in a favorable situation to do this. Probably one of the best teamwork examples of teamwork I've seen in mission control, because for about a 45-minute period of time, we're literally conducting a physics experiment in space. We're trying to figure out which thrusters, sets of thrusters, or combinations of thrusters fired in which direction for how long will set up the spin-up condition we need. After about 45 minutes work, we feel we got all the proper pieces. We voice it up to the crew. Crew executes it. Doesn't work. We're convinced we had the procedure right. They must have missed one of the steps, so we tell them to try it a second time, and this time it works like a champ. Spacecraft is spinning perfectly on its axis, sun heating all sides. Now we can power down the spacecraft. We bring it down to a level of just a couple hundred watts, which is just enough to operate a small fan, provide power for communications. We know it's going to get as cold as a meat locker inside the spacecraft. We can also go off and get some rest because we've been operating over 60 hours continuously by this time. Now we're resting. Engineering comes up with a solution to another problem we got, and this was very well depicted in the movie Apollo 13. Our crew is about 10 hours from suffocation. We basically rebreathe the oxygen in the spacecraft. We run it through a canister containing a chemical called lithium hydroxide, which basically removes the carbon dioxide from the crew breathing in the atmosphere. We only had enough of these cylindrical canisters in the lunar module for 2 people for 2 days. So the carbon dioxide partial pressure is building up, and they feel the crew is about 10 hours from asphyxiation due to carbon dioxide poisoning. Engineering comes up with the idea, however, we got plenty of square scrubbers over in the command module. So they come up with the idea of building an adapter made out of the cardboard cover from the flight plan, a big plastic baggie we had on board. We use a sock as a filter, lash this thing together with duct tape and some hoses, tested in the labs, voice the instructions up to the crew, not only to build one of these guys, but to build 2 of them and put them in series so we can clean the atmosphere as rapidly as possible. Another example of the just-in-time engineering that we executed on Apollo 13. About the time this